The first scream cut through the morning quiet like a bullet. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the hallways of Westridge High School erupted in chaos as students bolted from classrooms, some dropping to the ground, others crawling beneath desks. Through the school's intercom system, Principal Davis's voice crackled with an urgency no drill had ever carried. Code Red. This is not a drill. All students and staff initiate lockdown protocol immediately. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder as police cruisers and SWAT vehicles converged on the campus, their flashing lights painting the brick facade in alternating red and blue. Helicopter blades chopped through the air overhead, drowning out the sound of terrified parents who had begun to gather behind hastily erected barricades, many still in pajamas or work uniforms, clutching phones with white knuckles as they desperately tried to reach their children. On television screens across America, regular programming gave way to breaking news banners and live aerial footage of what reporters were calling a developing situation at Westridge High School. The words "possible active shooter" and "terror threat" scrolled across the bottom of screens, sending shockwaves through living rooms and offices nationwide. Inside room 213, 16-year-old Elijah Chen huddled in the corner with his best friend Marcus Williams, a sophomore with cerebral palsy whose wheelchair had been pushed behind the teacher's desk. Elijah's hand rested protectively on Marcus's shoulder as they both tried to control their breathing, the way they'd been taught in countless drills. But this wasn't a drill. The fear was real. The danger was real. Or so they believed. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "We were just getting ready for the parade." Elijah squeezed his friend's shoulder. I know. The costume parade. That's what all this was supposed to be about today. The Special Education Department's annual celebration of creativity and inclusion, an event that had taken weeks of preparation, joy, and anticipation. Now, instead of showcasing their handmade costumes, they were hiding in darkness, wondering if they would make it home alive. What no one in that classroom knew, what no one in the school yet understood, was that the entire crisis had been manufactured by a single phone call. A call made by someone who saw threat and danger where there was only innocence and joy. A call that would change their community forever. 2 days earlier, the halls of Westridge High had hummed with the usual Monday morning energy. Students shuffled between lockers, comparing weekend stories and dreading upcoming tests. For the students in Ms. Patel's special education class, however, the mood was electric with excitement. The annual Unity Costume Parade was just days away, their moment to shine before the entire school. Remember, everyone, your costume should represent something meaningful to you, Ms. Patel said, her warm smile encompassing the diverse group of students seated before her. This parade is about expressing yourselves and showing the school who you really are. At his desk, Marcus sketched final adjustments to his elaborate robot costume design. Despite the challenges his cerebral palsy presented, he had become the unofficial artistic director for half the class. His fingers moved with practiced precision across the paper, adding details to mechanical arms and a control panel that would be attached to his wheelchair. "You think people will get that I'm not just any robot?" he asked Elijah, who was working on his own astronaut costume beside him. "I want them to see it's about augmented humanity, how technology and people can work together." Elijah nodded, admiration clear in his eyes. Though neurotypical himself, he had been Marcus's friend since middle school and had become a regular volunteer in Ms. Patel's class. "It's brilliant, Mark. People are going to be blown away." Across the room, Sophie Jenkins carefully assembled pieces for her butterfly transformation costume. her hands occasionally trembling from her Parkinson's-like symptoms. Next to her, Zain Mirza, who rarely spoke due to his severe anxiety disorder, meticulously painted a papier-mâché mask for his phoenix costume. The symbolism of rebirth particularly meaningful after his recent return to school, following months of intensive therapy. Ms. Patel called Lucia Diaz, a junior with Down syndrome, who had become the heart and soul of the group. "Can we practice walking down the hallway again? I want to make sure my solar system costume doesn't hit anything when I spin." Ms. Patel checked her watch. "We have 15 minutes before the bell. Let's make the most of it." She opened the classroom door, and the students filed into the empty hallway, their half-finished costumes creating a colorful procession. What they didn't notice was the woman standing at the far end of the corridor, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Elaine Winters, known as Ms. Winters to the students, had started as a substitute teacher at Westridge just 3 weeks ago. She watched the impromptu parade with narrowing eyes, her gaze lingering on the large backpacks and boxes the students carried, filled with costume materials. The following day, Ms. Patel was unexpectedly called away for a family emergency. The news rippled through her classroom like a cold wave. "My mother's in the hospital," she explained, gathering her things quickly. "The administration is sending Ms. Winters to cover my classes until I return." A collective groan rose from the students. "I know she's a bit strict," Ms. Patel acknowledged, choosing her words carefully. "But please show her the same respect you show me. The parade is still on for Thursday. Just follow the plans we've already made." When Ms. Winters strode into the classroom 20 minutes later, the atmosphere immediately shifted. She wore a gray skirt suit that seemed to match the coldness in her eyes as she surveyed the classroom, her gaze stopping at the costume materials spread across the back tables. "Put those away," she commanded without introduction. "This is a classroom, not an arts and crafts festival." Lucia raised her hand, her expression earnest. "But Ms. Patel said we could work on our costumes during free periods. The parade is in 2 days." "Ms. Patel isn't here," Ms. Winters replied sharply. "And while I'm in charge, we will focus on academics. These distractions are precisely why special education students fall behind." The comment hung in the air like poison. Elijah, who was helping during his study period, felt his face grow hot. "That's not fair," he said, standing from his seat. "These students maintain good grades while working on projects like this. The parade is important for school unity." Ms. Winters turned her cold gaze to him. "And you are—" "Elijah Chen. I volunteer here." "Well, Mr. Chen, your volunteering doesn't give you the authority to question my teaching methods. Perhaps you should return to your regularly scheduled class." Reluctantly, Elijah packed up his things, casting an apologetic glance at Marcus and the others. As he reached the door, he heard Ms. Winters addressing the class again. "Now, those materials in the back, they need to be stored somewhere else. I don't want them cluttering my classroom." "They're not clutter," Marcus protested, his voice quiet but firm. "They're important to us." Ms. Winters' expression hardened. "Important, making costumes. When you could be learning practical skills that might actually help you function in society." She shook her head. "This is exactly the kind of coddling that does a disservice to students like you." The room fell silent. Marcus looked down at his hands, his face flushed with humiliation. Zane began rocking slightly in his seat, a sign of his rising anxiety. You can store your materials in the supply closet down the hall. Ms. Winters continued, seemingly oblivious to or unconcerned with the distress she was causing. But I don't want to see them in this classroom again. That afternoon, after most students had gone home, Ms. Winters lingered in the classroom. She moved through the rows of desks slowly, examining papers and notebooks. When she reached the supply closet, where the costume materials had been reluctantly stored, she paused, looking both ways down the empty hall before slipping inside. 20 minutes later, she emerged, carefully closing the door behind her. If anyone had been watching, they might have noticed she was wearing latex gloves, or that her large handbag seemed heavier than before. But the hallway remained empty, and Ms. Winters walked briskly toward the exit, her face impassive. The next morning parade day, Ms. Winters arrived early. She made her way directly to the office of Principal Davis, her expression grave. "I need to speak with you," she said without preamble. "It's urgent." Principal Davis, a veteran educator with 25 years of experience, gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What's this about, Elaine?" Ms. Winters sat rigidly at the edge of the seat. "I've noticed concerning behavior among some of the special education students. Secretive conversations, strange materials being transported in backpacks and boxes. And yesterday, I overheard two of them discussing what sounded like plans." Plans. Principal Davis's brow furrowed. "What kind of plans?" "They mentioned making an impact, and the whole school will remember this day. Given the current climate of school violence, I felt it was my responsibility to bring this to your attention." Principal Davis leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. "Elaine, these students are preparing for their annual costume parade today. They're excited about showcasing their creativity. I think you might be misinterpreting." Ms. Winters cut him off. "With all due respect, sir, are you willing to take that chance in this day and age, when the news is filled with school tragedies that might have been prevented if someone had spoken up?" The principal's face grew serious. "Have you seen anything specific that would indicate an actual threat?" "Not yet," Ms. Winters admitted. "But I'm concerned about those materials stored in the supply closet. Some of the boxes are quite heavy, and the students are very protective of them. They won't let anyone see what's inside." Principal Davis sighed. "I appreciate your vigilance, Elaine, but these are good kids. Many of them have been in our school for years. I find it hard to believe they would be involved in anything dangerous." "Perhaps you're right," Ms. Winters conceded, rising from her chair. "I hope you are. I just felt it was my duty to say something." As she left the office, she pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over the keypad. If the principal wouldn't take action, she would find someone who would. By 10:15 a.m., the excitement in Ms. Patel's classroom had reached a fever pitch. Though their regular teacher was still absent, the students had arrived early to retrieve their costumes from the supply closet and make final adjustments before the 11:30 parade. "Something's wrong with my costume," Marcus said, frowning as he examined the robot control panel that would attach to his wheelchair. "These wires weren't like this yesterday." Sophie nodded, holding up her butterfly wings. "Mine feels heavier too. And look, there's a tear in the fabric that wasn't there before." Elijah, who had been excused from his morning classes to help with final preparations, examined Marcus's costume piece. "It looks like someone's been messing with it," he confirmed, turning it over in his hands. "Maybe it got damaged when we moved everything to the closet," Lucia suggested, always looking for the positive explanation. Before they could discuss it further, Ms. Winters entered the classroom, her expression unreadable as she took in the scene costume pieces spread across desks. Students gathered in excited clusters, the energy palpable. "I see you've retrieved your projects," she said flatly. Elijah stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am. The parade starts in just over an hour. We need to finish getting ready." Ms. Winters nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the room. "I'll be stepping out briefly. Continue your preparations." With that, she turned and walked back into the hallway, pulling the classroom door shut behind her. Once alone in the corridor, she removed her phone from her pocket and dialed a number, her fingers trembling slightly with what might have been fear or anticipation. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Yes. Hello," Ms. Winters said, her voice suddenly breathless. "I'm a teacher at Westridge High School. I need to report a possible terrorist situation." The dispatcher's voice sharpened. "Can you elaborate, ma'am?" "A group of students has been acting suspiciously. They're carrying strange devices, wires, heavy materials hidden in backpacks. I've overheard them discussing making an impact and the whole school remembering this day. And now they're preparing to move throughout the building in some kind of coordinated event." "Are you in immediate danger, ma'am?" Ms. Winters lowered her voice to a whisper. "I don't think they know I suspect anything yet. But they're in room 213. Special education students, though, I believe they're being manipulated by others. There are wires, strange equipment. I'm afraid they might have weapons." The next few minutes unfolded with the terrible efficiency of well-rehearsed emergency protocols. Police were dispatched. The school's resource officer was alerted. And at precisely 10:27 a.m., Principal Davis's voice came over the intercom, initiating the lockdown that would transform an ordinary Thursday into a day that would indeed be remembered, though not for the reasons anyone had planned. In room 213, confusion quickly gave way to terror as the students processed what was happening. Elijah helped Marcus onto the floor behind the teacher's desk, then pulled his wheelchair in front of them as an additional barrier. Sophie huddled nearby, her body trembling, not from her medical condition, but from fear. Lucia and Zane pressed themselves into the corner of the room, Zane rocking back and forth, his hands over his ears. Through the classroom's small window, they caught glimpses of officers moving swiftly through the hallway, weapons drawn. Each footstep, each command shouted in the distance sent new waves of fear through the room. "Why is this happening?" Lucia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Today was supposed to be our parade." No one had an answer for her. The classroom door burst open 20 minutes later, causing several students to cry out in terror. Armed officers swept into the room, their movements precise and practiced. "Hands where we can see them, everyone now." Trembling hands rose into the air. Zayn began to rock more violently, overwhelmed by the sensory assault. One officer approached him, weapon still raised. "I said hands up," he barked. "He has autism," Elijah called out, his voice cracking. "He's having a sensory overload. He's not a threat." The officers moved through the room methodically, checking each student, examining the costume pieces scattered across desks and floors. One picked up Marcus's robot control panel, studying the wires with narrowed eyes. "What's this?" he demanded. "It's for my costume," Marcus replied, his voice small. "For the parade today." The officer spoke into his radio. "We've got devices with wiring in here. Send in the bomb squad for assessment. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Bomb squad. The students exchanged looks of horror and confusion. Bombs, Sophie whispered. They think we have bombs. Outside the school, the situation was escalating rapidly. News vans had joined the growing crowd of parents. Helicopters circled overhead. Social media exploded with rumors, multiple shooters, bombs planted throughout the school, a coordinated terrorist attack involving students. With each passing minute, the narrative grew more distorted, more terrifying. Janet Williams paced behind the police barricade, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried for the 20th time to reach her son Marcus. Each unanswered ring sent her heart rate higher. Nearby, other parents were in similar states of panic, crying, praying, demanding information from overwhelmed police officers who had little to share. My son is in a wheelchair, Janet told anyone who would listen. He can't hide under a desk. He can't run. Someone has to help him. Inside the school, the students from room 213 were being evacuated under heavy guard, their hands held above their heads as they were led through hallways now lined with tactical officers. For Marcus, the process was particularly humiliating. Unable to hold his hands up while moving his wheelchair, an officer had taken control, pushing him roughly through the corridor while keeping a hand on his shoulder. The costumes, Lucia said suddenly as they approached the exit. We can't leave our costumes. Quiet, an officer ordered. Keep moving. Outside, in the harsh sunlight, the students blinked in confusion as they were directed to a staging area where officers began to question them individually. Parents were kept at a distance, still behind barricades, their cries and calls creating a soundtrack of desperation. Inside the building, the bomb squad had arrived and was carefully examining the costume materials. After 30 tense minutes, their assessment came through: no explosives, no weapons, nothing but fabric, cardboard, paint, and harmless electronic components for lights and simple movements. But by then, the narrative had taken on a life of its own. News anchors spoke gravely about a potential tragedy averted. Social media buzzed with speculation about troubled special needs students, and warning signs missed. Even as police began to acknowledge there might have been a misunderstanding, the damage was being done. It was only when the school's security footage was reviewed that the true story began to emerge. In the administrative offices, Principal Davis, the police captain, and the school district superintendent watched in stunned silence as the footage played on a monitor. It showed Ms. Winters entering the supply closet the previous afternoon. Inside, she moved methodically from costume to costume, placing objects into some, rearranging components in others. From her handbag, she withdrew what appeared to be old electronic parts, discarded phone components, wires, circuit boards, and carefully integrated them into the students' creations. The police captain paused the footage. She planted evidence, he said flatly. She created this entire situation. Principal Davis shook his head in disbelief. But why would she do something like this? The answer came an hour later, when officers searching Ms. Winters' apartment discovered a laptop filled with disturbing content membership in extremist online forums that opposed inclusive education, believing that resources were being wasted on disabled students. A document titled Manifesto for Educational Purity, and most damning of all, a detailed plan to expose the danger of mainstreaming unstable elements in our schools. By evening, Ms. Winters was in custody, charged with filing a false police report, endangering minors, and several other serious offenses. But for the students and families affected, the legal consequences were just the beginning of a long road to recovery. The physical lockdown had ended, but the emotional one was just beginning. 2 days later, the community gathered in Westridge High's gymnasium. The mood was somber, a sharp contrast to the celebration that should have taken place. Principal Davis stood at the podium, his face showing the strain of the past 48 hours. "What happened on Thursday was inexcusable," he began, his voice steady despite his obvious emotion. "Our students were victimized twice: first, by the actions of an individual with prejudice in her heart, and then, by a system that was too quick to assume the worst of them, based on nothing but that individual's word." In the front row, Ms. Patel sat with her students, having returned immediately upon hearing the news. Beside her, Marcus stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Lucia held Sophie's hand tightly, while Zane sat with headphones on, still struggling to process the trauma. "But today," Principal Davis continued, "we begin the process of healing, and we start by giving back what was taken from these remarkable young people, their moment to shine." At his signal, the lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated the side entrance to the gym. Music began to play, the same song that had been selected for the original parade. For a moment, nothing happened. The entrance remained empty. Then, slowly, Marcus appeared in the doorway, his wheelchair adorned with the robot costume pieces that had been carefully reassembled after being examined and returned by the police. He hesitated, uncertainty evident in his posture. From the audience, a figure stood: Elijah's father, Dr. Chen, a respected surgeon at the local hospital. He began to applaud, slowly and deliberately. One by one, others joined him: teachers, students, parents, community members, rising to their feet in a wave of support that grew into a thunderous standing ovation. Marcus's expression transformed as he guided his wheelchair forward, the robot costume now coming to life with lights and movement. Behind him, Lucia emerged in her solar system ensemble, then Sophie with her butterfly wings, and Zane in his phoenix mask. One by one, the students completed the parade that had been denied them, each step a reclamation of their dignity. The applause continued, punctuated now by cheers and whistles. Many in the audience were openly weeping, including Janet Williams, who watched her son navigate the path with a pride that transcended the trauma of recent days. When all the students had completed their procession and gathered at the front of the gym, Principal Davis returned to the microphone. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have work to do as a school, as a community, and as a society. Work to ensure that prejudice never again masquerades as concern, that fear never again overrides reason, that our most vulnerable students never again bear the burden of our worst assumptions." In the weeks that followed, that work took many forms. A comprehensive review of emergency response protocols was initiated, with special attention to the needs of disabled students during lockdowns and evacuations. School counselors were supplemented by trauma specialists to help students process what had happened. And a new program was established, the Unity Council, bringing together diverse students, staff, and parents to promote understanding and inclusion throughout the district. For the students directly affected, recovery came in smaller, more personal moments. For Marcus, it was returning to school the following Monday, despite his mother's offer to let him stay home longer. "If I don't go back now," he told her, "the fear wins." For Sophie, it was finding the courage to speak at a school board meeting, her voice and hands trembling, but her words clear and powerful. "See us for who we are, not what you fear we might be." For Zane, Healing came through art, a series of paintings that transformed his experience of terror into powerful images of resilience that would later be displayed in the school's main hallway. And for Lucia, it was organizing a new parade for the following spring, bigger, more inclusive, with participants from schools throughout the district. Ms. Winter's trial became a national flashpoint, drawing attention to issues of prejudice against disabled students and prompting congressional hearings on school safety protocols. She was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison, the judge citing the extraordinary recklessness of actions that could have led to tragedy. On the 1-year anniversary of the lockdown, Westridge High held a ceremony of remembrance and recommitment. The Unity Council unveiled a sculpture in the school's courtyard, a phoenix rising from ashes, inspired by Zane's costume. Beneath it, a plaque bore words chosen by the students themselves: from darkness, light; from fear, strength; from division, unity. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus wheeled himself to the podium, now a senior preparing for college, where he planned to study design engineering. The crowd fell silent as he adjusted the microphone. "A year ago," he began, "someone looked at us and saw only what made us different. She couldn't see past our disabilities to recognize our humanity. She couldn't imagine that our differences might be strengths. She couldn't believe that we belonged." He paused, looking out at the gathered community, at Elijah and his father, at Ms. Patel wiping tears from her eyes, at his mother standing tall and proud. "But here's what I've learned since then," Marcus continued. "Belonging isn't something others grant you. It's something you claim for yourself. And once you claim it, no one can take it away." He gestured to the phoenix sculpture gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Like that phoenix, we have risen from a dark day. And like that phoenix, we are stronger for having faced the fire." As Marcus spoke these final words, a butterfly landed gently on the sculpture's outstretched wing, a moment so perfectly timed it drew gasps from those who noticed. Sophie pointed, her face lighting up with joy. "Look," she called out, "it's a sign." Whether sign or serendipity, the butterfly remained, wings slowly opening and closing in the warm spring air, as the crowd once again rose to its feet in applause, not from sympathy this time, but from genuine admiration and respect for young people who had taught their community the true meaning of courage. In her seat near the back, Ms. Patel watched her students with quiet pride. The darkness had not defined them. The fear had not consumed them. Instead, they had transformed a moment of terrible prejudice into a movement for lasting change. As the applause gradually subsided and people began to move toward the reception area, Elijah made his way to Marcus, clasping his friend's shoulder. "Pretty amazing speech," he said with a smile. "Though I think the butterfly stole your thunder at the end there." Marcus laughed, a full, uninhibited sound that would have been unimaginable in the dark days after the lockdown. "I'll take it," he replied. "Some kinds of interruptions are welcome." Together, they moved through the courtyard, joining their friends and families in a celebration that honored not just their survival of a terrible day, but their triumph in all the days that followed, days filled with the hard, necessary work of building a community where everyone truly belonged. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the campus of Westridge High, the phoenix sculpture gleamed golden in the fading light. The butterfly had long since departed, but its brief presence remained in the memories of those who had witnessed it, a reminder that even the smallest and most fragile among us have the power to soar. And in the warm spring evening, as laughter and conversation filled the courtyard, The shadows of the past finally began to recede, replaced by the promise of a future built on understanding, respect, and the unshakable knowledge that diversity is not something to fear, but something to celebrate. A future where no one would ever again look at these remarkable young people and see anything but the fullness of their humanity and the boundless potential of their dreams.